Here we are. So Zoom wants me to sign in now. I can do that. Yeah, so with a question as to what I'm trying to write, it really is about personalization, taking a start from accessibility and going further on with that. That makes sense, right?
Who are you writing it for? Because the papers are closed now. I got a notice last night that it was closed.
It's for human.
Huh. So I heard that, I mean, everything was closed last night, but guess not.
No, no, human is 30th. Because it's a workshop, it has different dates.
Okay, so you're going to talk about accessibility at the Human Workshop.
No, I'm not going to talk about accessibility. That's what I'm trying to clarify. It's not about accessibility. It's taking accessibility as a starting point to personalized interactions. So accessibility is why I would like to collaborate with you because you are brilliant at that. The notion is just that, as we can see from this little color test, even something that isn't considered a disability can have really big differences to people's quality of life. Yeah.
This is what we do in my lab every day. This is what UX UI is about. Chi is about UX UI. So you were talking about the ACM Chi. Those folks do what we do, and that is UX UI. That's Holly's specialty. And yes, we run everything through a color chart to make sure it's readable. There's nothing that comes out of the lab that's not. So color affects not just disabilities, but anybody's ability to read.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's related, but it's not the same thing. And hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. How are you?
There he is. Hello.
Hello,
And
hello.
see his new shirt,
Very
From
fancy.
Canada, thrifting.
Canada.
Doesn't look Canadian at all. Oh no.
Hmm.
Canadians can be lumberjacks.
Yes, they
Where
can.
do they get all the maple syrup? From the trees.
This is very
From
true.
the trees, from the jar. We got ours from a jar.
Yeah, so Dini, just to clarify my position on this, obviously you know much more about this. What I'm saying is if we look now on this chart here together, for instance, right? Hang on, let me just make it a bit bigger. Is that clear and easy?
Yeah, I mean, I totally get it. And certainly, this is what we do in the lab. It's what
Okay,
we teach in our program. We teach an entire course on usability.
yeah, but this is not about usability because the point is uh, what's really kind of woke me up to this was somebody I was sitting working in author and I was tweaking some colors. And this person wanted completely different level of contrast than what I wanted.
Mhm.
So you can't, no matter what usability and accessibility, you can't satisfy two different criteria if they just feel different. So if you look at these numbers of what people contributed so far, the vast majority of people want black text on white. So this is not about usability. This is about personal taste. But when you then look at the difference between the lower down ones, it's quite an even spread. You don't feel like engaging with this, do you?
Well, I think you got it done. You got it done. So go for it. I have nothing to add of any value. So you're on it.
Okay, Danny, I don't know why you're taking such a non-happy stance on this because
I'm not. I think it's great. You're doing a good job. You don't need my, I mean, good. I'm giving you my support.
what I'm trying to say is that there is a strong accessibility start to this work. Hi, Fabian. But it goes into more about what it is to personalize for people. And so I think it would make sense to do a collaboration with what you're doing for that. But I don't think it is just usability or accessibility. I think it is a bit different. I think maybe that's where we look at it slightly differently.
Okay. Hi, Fabian. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm great.
I hope I didn't interrupt drama.
No, we're just talking about Frode's next paper.
Okay, cool. By the way, briefly on this, I skimmed through the paper, Frode, and honestly, I wanted to submit something, but at the same time, it's not my medium, basically. And I feel like by trying to do bridge both, like writing in XR where people can experience the result, I think honestly I can do something more useful for more people. So I'll for now still consider this instead as a medium.
Yeah, that's fair enough, Fabian. So the second paper that I'm writing, which is for the workshop, is not the same. It is different, but I think it is even more you. The premise is that I'm very picky as a human. I want text to be like this and that. And then Mark is very picky, and it turns out we want it different. And then Klaus, who is an esteemed professor in the area, wants something different still. And that I think is really important. So Klaus and Mark has been arguing over single versus two column layouts, which is a very fundamental and basic thing. And Mark has many reasons, as you've heard, about writing for different medium and stuff on, but Klaus prefers two column. So that is, I wouldn't say that is about accessibility, and I wouldn't say it's about ease of use. I would say it's purely what suits the individual person. And in this survey, I'll just show it again, actually, that I did. The point of the survey was not to, hang on, there it is, to determine one correct color that people could read. It was just a small test. You can see it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. It was just to show that people want very different things. I just talked to one husband and wife team today. They're both professionals. They're both brilliant. She wants white text on black. He wants black text on white. So that's one thing that we have on most computer systems, or dark or light mode. Within that, there's also quite a good variation of people who want fully black background or dark gray background, neutral or brown. So I think this carries over into the interfaces we might be building, where we also have a high degree of personalization as to how we use gestures and voice and so on, that we don't try to build systems that deals with the 95th percentile, but are much easier to customize. And this is what you do with code, I would say. You help people customize their environments to a really rich degree. I had a meeting with a specialist who builds all kinds of gadgets today, talking about building kind of a squishy thing, like a cylinder. Just hold this up. So it would interpret your gestures very much like we have an XR in space, but in XR space, we don't have anything to touch. So this thing would have sensors, and it would provide haptic feedback. Such a thing would obviously have to be customized to the user, because we all have different shaped hands with different muscles and so on. So then we get into the notion of training, using basic AI for the interface to learn what your gesture range is and so on. So I'm trying to develop a way to look at starting. Dini, I have here in the background of my computer your ELMS 3.0. I think that is a super important basis. And then to stretch that kind of into also looking at basically taste. I think taste is super important as we go into this.
So just a point of reference, it's called ELMS, just to make it easy.
Elm sounds better than ELMS 3.0. Yes.
Yeah, ELMS.
Elms is nice.
Yeah, we just got invited to back to Triangle SEI. That's a Mellon Foundation event next fall. It's their last event in the grant that they had. It was a 10-year grant. And so we're going out to talk about elms again. And I'm really excited about that. So we got invited back. Only a few people did. There were something like 100 proposals. They accepted 10. So
Oh,
I feel pretty good about it. That was the good news yesterday.
it's yeah, no, that's very good news. But I mean, looking at this list, you have many things that aren't obvious. One of them being fleeting content. That's obviously a very hard thing to design for because some people don't want things in front of them a long time. Other people desperately do. And there can be many reasons for that. So I could go through the whole list and say why each one is brilliant. But yeah, it's just very good.
There's a lot of work in the net art field that has text kind of blown across the screen. And if you are a fast reader, it's no problem at all. Mark, you got a haircut. But if you have some trouble with, cognitive issues, it's
No,
hard.
I'm just getting beach ready.
That was
So
kind of
what
a
we're,
cheesy
Do
haircut.
beach.
but we're not prescribing what people should do or not do. We're describing, and that's a totally different thing. So if you're looking at a work, what is it doing? How is it functioning? And just letting people know in advance. It's just so we're not telling people don't do these things, but here's what this is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's hugely important. And like with what Andrew is doing now, it has been highly optimized for me because I'm the most vocal user. The pointer thing I really disliked, as you know, and it's been tweaked. And of course, it's been tweaked to our community. But it would be from the philosophy of the paper that I'm trying to put together, the different ways people point needs to be taken into account soon. So that everybody has as good as an experience in there as Andrew has made for me. But also, once these things are learned, it should be portable. When I go into a new environment, I don't want to have to go and specify every color and every movement. There should be something like Frode Hegland is a difficult person.json, although that may be a very big file, but that I can take with me and the new system can read and say, these are the things that we know about, can change it for you. For instance, little cubes, you prefer them maximum this big or whatever it might be. But I'm realizing more and more that if you look at professional athletes, they don't use standard equipment. They have specialized bikes, specialized seats, specialized shoes, etc. Athletes of the mind need the same level of customization too. Yes, Mr. Haircut.
I was just thinking, but what I heard being described was describing the underlying structure through how it's visualized. So in other words, the point that you're really driving at is not what it looks like. That's just the output of the metadata that describes the thing. So in terms of the pointing, what you're saying is that between what you're doing and having a certain form of pointing, there needs to be an access point that can be configured via metadata if there is any. And that gives you your hinge point to the experience. And if that isn't designed in, then likely it will be just a pain to shim in later. So that the key design takeaway I take from this is less what it looks like, because there can be many things that it looks like, but the fact that the information sort of coming into the environment needs to go through this point where there is a process where customization can basically override the defaults. Would that be a fair summation?
I think there's several different things here, but yeah, it is. For instance, if your eyes prefer to read and write with a certain color combination, that should be available to other writing environments if you want it to be.
I'm just confused, but again, you're talking about the output. What I mean is all these things are, I think what you're describing as a whole is that there needs to be a configuration point where all these different experiences and all these different limitations can be stored.
Yeah. Or somehow moved across like a settings file or something. I don't know. But yeah, sorry, Mark. Yeah. Similar thing. It's just becoming more and more important, I think, because interfaces are becoming more and more personal. You know, I had a meeting with Bjorn today about building a squishy thing you can squeeze instead of having your hand in thin air. And he talked about all the different sensors and actuators that work in different ways depending on what kind of sensitivities you have at different parts of your fingers. If you hold one of these things, hi Rob, talking about personalizing interfaces, and right now particularly with gestures. So if you have a little, like a squishy ball, so if you want to do an action, you can do it. And I could imagine in the Dini room where she's standing with 360 text around, I can imagine if you have something like a squishy ball, you can move something. And because you squeeze it, you actually crumple it to be smaller when you throw it away. So it has all those finesses of interaction rather than what we have now, which is mostly analog on-off, not analog, digital on-off. So move or don't move. So you can, and also when you touch something, you have different kinds of feelings depending on what you're touching and what kind of things you want to experience.
We've substituted touch with sound, so that's one of the things that people have done. But years ago, we experimented in the lab with a haptic device called the Falcon controller. Some of you in gaming might remember it, but it was a way to get haptic feedback in a virtual environment. And it was very awkward to connect it with everything else we were doing. It was too separate. We couldn't integrate it enough. It was not seamless. But we tried, and I have two of them in my archive now, two controllers. So we just reverted back to sound as a way to give some sort of feedback.
That is really useful experience. Thank you, Dini. Colleague? I'll just call instead of Mr. Anderson.
I was just thinking in terms of this, another sort of design thing that falls out from this is, well, if I give the example, I'm lucky enough to have 5 working digits on this hand. Let's say I only had 2. If we have an interface that assigns things to fingers, the interface at that point needs to know which of the 2 most important functions of the 5 that we would normally use to actually do anything in the space. So that should be our default mapping for someone, say, with 2 fingers, because there's only 2 fingers they've got. So the point is, the counterintuitive part is something that we need to think about in the design, is saying, okay, right, well, we're going to allow controls for 5 things here. They need to be prioritized in order 1 to 5 for that reason alone. Most people don't need to bother about it, but if you don't have it, then it's a real pig to try and sort of reach into the depths to do it after the fact.
Yes, 100%. And that relates obviously so much to accessibility. I do have one friend who's missing an entire hand, and she loves to shake hands with people to make them aware of this. That's like her literal first greeting. So in addition to the systems being able to learn exactly how we want to use a thing and see a thing, I really think it's important that interactions are transferable. Just like on a computer, you can click or keyboard shortcuts. We should be able to go into, for instance, what Andrew's building in a few years when we have more money, and do much more voice or gesture or keyboard or gamepad or whatever. So you get different levels of fidelity, different levels of control, different levels of accessibility. But we try to provide the opportunity for all of them to interact with the system at one point. And of course, that's to do with APIs and metadata, generally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an important issue, and it's an exciting issue, because it used to be, obviously, that the limitations of the system meant that you couldn't change that many things. So accessibility was a very clear thing. Now, just the fact that for the Vision Pro, you can't buy it without telling it exactly the shape of your face, because the little light seal has to be customized to you. That's a nod towards accessibility, but everybody has to do it now. It's like fitting
Actually,
shoes.
I thought that's interesting you say that, because I had a different take on that. I was thinking that Apple did that to make sure it stayed within its ecosystem and people had to buy their very own. So I saw it as a way for Apple to continue doing what it's always done, right? Not so much being kind to people who are disabled, but it does have that secondary use, which is great.
I completely agree. I find it really egregious the way they make it bound to one person for the ecosystem. Absolutely 100%. 100%.
Yeah, I'm trying to get enough headsets for the fall semester, and it's easy to do it with the Quest.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's not the. Hopefully soon the App Store will be available in the UK as well before it goes on sale. So that'll be very interesting. Now, one thing that has become interesting is the notion of intimacy, because while we're in shared VR space, if you get really close to someone or overlap in their space, that's not a comfortable thing necessarily. Similarly, with our skin, we're beginning to do the gesture things, but if we have anything touching us, the people building it so far seem to be very masculine and machine-like about it. But touch is a very, very intimate thing. And also we have 6 different nerve cells on our skin that perceives different kind of touch. You have the one that only, well, like a really soft tickling or a fly across your skin. It's very different from a deeper sense that if you hold a knife, it feels where you're touching the wood. That all these things need to be taken account of now, and they can be done. So we need to look at how far into the human body do we want to go in order to go deeper into our information space.
One thing we're doing with the visualization space in the next that Andrew's programming for us is that when you are looking at Richard Holton's beach ball that he used for hypertext performances, when you move it around, we're hoping to get the sound of the squeaking sound of plastic. So if you've ever held a beach ball in your hand and thrown it, it makes that kind of squishy beach, I don't know, what do you call that? Kind of a squeaky sound. So getting that attached to the beach ball. And I'm still trying to think what to do with the spam cans. We have 30-year-old spam cans. Maybe if you shake it, it'll sound a little watery. So yeah, we're trying to come up with sounds that are indicative of the objects that you're holding in your hand in the VR space. Should be
That
fun.
is very, very thoughtful.
Should be
That's really
fun.
brilliant.
I suspect spam cans, like the cockroach in Wall-E, will be here long after we're gone. So I wouldn't worry about their contents, Aunt Judy. My reason for raising my hand was just to think practically. So taking this point about allowing for these different types of interaction is this seemed to be an important thing for our documentation in the project, because one of the things to mull on is how that possible range of affordances is shown to someone who is effectively authoring from the environment. And I don't mean the sort of authoring that's having to be done, by the likes of sort of prototyping that Fabian is doing for sake of argument, because at this point we're having to build the whole thing all the way through. But we will be getting to the point where someone says, okay, I want to write a lesson in the XR space. So one of the things that will need to be possible is for in a sense, the semi-expert person who's not trained in the depth of the construction of the environment, but is trained in the use of it, knowing what affordances they're writing for. They don't have to use them, but what they can do. And that would sit neatly alongside this thing of prioritization. So one of their jobs as an author would be to understand how the sort of the task or the narrative moves ahead. And so in other words, if you've only, the first thing is if you only have one button to press, what will it default to do? Because I think that's part of the thing that the author will have to understand, and therefore it's incumbent upon us to think about exposing that in a way that doesn't just require them to learn a whole lot of tech, because that would be deeply unfriendly and unhelpful.
Absolutely. Hi, Peter.
Good
morning, just in from brunch.
Good. Talking about intimate interfaces. And Andrew, I have a question for you. Can you present the gestures to us? You don't have to show anything on screen, but just talk us through it the way you see it now so that we check on pages, so to speak.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to do is based on the sort of the menus on the fingers that was pitched a couple of weeks ago, but since I've been gone, I'm a little behind on the discussion there. Um, so the concept is we have more than just four options that we'll need. So the four options will probably be sub-menus of sorts, but sub-menus are kind of gross, as we tried with the pop-up menu earlier on in the project. So the idea is, what if each finger is kind of like a node, almost think of like an electrical circuit. Um, so right now I have, when you turn your hand to look at yourself, a bunch of like little circular nodes will appear on your fingertips, as well as on the opposite finger, a little connection piece that will snap in. And if you point at a menu node, it will then, two lines will come out, or three, or however many, will show subnodes. And you can then point to one of those and it'll open up more subnodes. So far from my testing, it feels pretty intuitive. And it becomes a gesture-based where if you want to get, say the third option, you'll just point and just kind of make a line with your hand and it'll just trigger the stuff you want. Um, which seems pretty easy to use. The stuff that I haven't quite figured out is if we want to trigger by just reaching the final node, which could in theory happen by accident, or if we want to get there and then pinch it, which will be more intuitive but a little bit slower. So both of those are things I'm trying to think of. Right now, I'm leaning towards pinch because I'd rather not have false positives.
That's brilliant. My commentary on that, having played around a lot with the map in author recently, is false positives are okay if they are benign. If you like select something, you have to reselect. If it's a move or a delete, that's obviously different. Also, we have two different kinds of interactions within this that I think we need to clarify. One of them is global hands-off, so to speak. Haha, I didn't mean that. Okay, so hang on. I'm just going to show you um, author, just to show you the placement of things. Obviously, you're not copying author, but it helps me speak. Right, you can see that, right? Okay, so what I mean by different things is lower left, there is a thing to show and hide stuff without selecting anything. Lower right is whatever is selected, we have layout options, right? So this is all stuff we talked about, just to make sure we're, so I'll just put these over to the right. Now there is another one, which is you've selected one item and you get a contextual control there. I'm wondering if we can use the hand in a similar way to that, because I can see that one of the things that'll be very valuable is if you selected a, let's say, a person, you want to now select all persons on the screen. But on a system like this, you're just going to click the letter S and it'll do it for you. We don't have the equivalent, of course. How does that fit within how you've been doing it so far, Andrew?
Yeah, the menus can have whatever we decide on. For starters, I started working on it because I know that for the map organization, things like snap to the left, snap to the right, snap up, snap down, which is one of the base functions you wanted, that's four. That's all the fingers that we really have here, unless you count them. So like that would be silly if each one is its own. So then you could go the route of, well, maybe index finger is snap direction, and then you've got the four options. So well, if we're going that route, why not nest things even further? So you could have like map into interaction and then snapping or something like that. So then you can also put in say like justifying and stuff like that. I don't know. We can definitely discuss as a group. The first demo that I'm gonna show off, which I was hoping to have today, but didn't because I ended up having a lot more troubles drawing the lines than I expected. Um, we'll just kind of have generic menus to show off the interface, and we can test interactions and see if that feels correct. Um, and they won't actually, well, the goal what they wasn't going to actually do anything in the environment. They might now, we'll see. But the main point is to just test the interaction and see how it feels. And then I expect the group as a whole to um, give feedback and come up with an actual menu interaction that we want to use.
I'm very happy to hear your approach. For the sake of discussion, not that you necessarily have to implement this, guy. So there is a difference between interactions on the volume of stuff. versus interactions with one selected node, right? So we have some ideas now of the show, hide, and layout and so on. What do you guys feel would be natural? You pointed, you got three little fingers, you pointed at something, you've selected it. Now you want to have options happen to that. You want the context menu. What are the feelings of how that would make sense? I mean, we could maybe have a double tap, which will probably jiggle it, move it a little bit, which might be annoying. Should we maybe use the second hand to something?
Probably one-handed at a time. If we have two hands to do one action, if somebody, I mean, it's once again, it's a usability thing. Some people may not have access to both hands. So if you give them a chance to do the activities with one hand, they can pick whatever hand they've got, right?
Yeah, but we have decided we're doing two-handed interactions. That's why we do this to choose the other fingers. So by default, that's the route we're going, right?
Andrew?
Didn't realize that was for me. I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, the other hand right now is kind of just an interface. You're not doing things with it. You're like, I guess you turn it to start the interaction, but then it's the other hand doing stuff. You can, of course, do this if you really want to, but it gets a little bit more complicated. Um, I hesitate to do stuff like, well, if you do this and then pinch, because then it starts to become a lot for the user to think about. Um, and we want users to be able to hop in here, play the demo, be like, oh, cool, I see the vision, and then get out. It's not like they're going to sit there and have enough time to become proficient in a bunch of crazy stuff. So we want to be have the impression work really fast. So I would hesitate on having like sort of the left hand be a shortcut key. We could of course go that route if you'd like,
But what
but
we
you're
have,
talking about
Andrew,
using it for
but,
selecting multiple things.
no, but
What was that
Andrew,
from?
the basic interaction we have, right, Dini, is you look at your not main hand, right?
Yeah.
And then you get text on it, and then you point to your fingers. That is what you're working on, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it is a two-handed interaction paradigm, Dini. It's yeah.
Well, presumably, if you don't have one hand, the hand that you're pointing to could be, presumably, in a sense, you could probably have some sort of a prosthetic hand inside the environment that you could summon. Therefore, your usable hand, which is the one that you need the motor control of, could then point to. So whereas you or I might hold up one hand and do this, somebody else would have probably a hand, because then it sticks with the same metaphor in space, except it wouldn't be their actual hand. It would have to be summoned for them. But that would allow them to use the same sort of interaction, which might aid some of the design things, because you wouldn't have to have a complete different design for someone who didn't have two hands.
But what
One
level
thing,
of accessibility are we looking at this point? Or
Well,
what level of normalcy, so to speak, are we looking at?
I turn the question around to saying, how hard do you want to make it to offer flexibility? So it goes back to these things of what are the minimum number of things you need to have to get through it.
Yeah.
Then you can draw all the twiddles on for the people who have the most ability. But if it doesn't work through the minimal route, then in a sense all bets are off, and you can't actually make this thing accessible. You actually have to design a completely different thing. So I don't think it's about them being. I'd come at it from a different angle, because I think the problem with designing for a baseline is you then invariably find that there's something that doesn't quite fit, and now you're back at square one. So if you turn it round and look at in a from a sort of necessity standpoint, that you need to be able to do these sorts of things, or you can't. Your quest stops there. If you think in the sort of the story mode, it's certainly to me, it's a rather counterintuitive way of thinking about things, but it's not difficult to do once asked. It just means you have to concentrate on the sort of, in a sense, the process narrative in a way that you don't normally do, because as a fully abled person, well, it's just intuitive, and you just do it, and you have all these affordances.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But we do need to decide on the baseline capabilities of the user. I thought we did not have a problem with expecting normal vision, so to speak, and normal limbs. Is that what you're concerned about, Dini?
Well, once again, it goes back to usability, but that's okay. We can't worry about that right now, right? We have to make something.
Right. Okay. So
just go ahead.
One other thing that might be useful, just linked to some things just being raised in terms of, well, what things we're trying to do, and in terms of accidental triggers. This came through from somebody sort of contacted me out of the blue and asked me to sort of walk them through using map spaces. And one of the things I came away from that from reflection that was new to this guy was to think in terms of, because he was all about what can I do and changing stuff, and then realized that some changes need to be done with a degree of thought. Some things are easier to undo. Moving something and just moving it back is a sort of comparatively simple undo. But removing a whole lot of stuff that then, through its removal, affects other things is probably not so sensibly done. So it's another consideration in terms of the things that you want to do. So that I would say the sort of simple things are quite literally the moving and selecting. But other things want a bit more. Showing and hiding is interesting because it sits very closely in people's mind's eye to sort of deleting, but they're of course very different things. So we need to think through this issue of sort of sense of what are you hiding? Are you trying to remove it from the problem space? Or are you literally just visually hiding it? You essentially wish it to be there. Because if it's there, you also have to think about, well, then does it still interact with visible things? So to what degree is it hidden? Is it merely invisible, or is it present but not visualized? So some quite interesting aspects, I think, come into this in terms of doing stuff in the XR space.
Mark, I would imagine that since we're in such a new space and people are just wrapping their minds around, what's possible in it, that we don't want things to disappear entirely, that we want them somewhere visible but not prominent, so that they remember where they put things, how to interact with these things. I think if we start letting people hide things, they'll never find them again.
I'd agree. But what I said, one consideration is whether that in a sense you look at a metaphor where the sort of the hiding more becomes you put it to one side, but it still knows where it was when it left its sort of its in zone, its in scope thing, because that's part of the unhiding part.
Yeah, what Andrew's done, I think, in his environment is that it's really quite cool, right? It goes in the background and the document you're interacting with comes up front. So it's there, but it's not prominent. It's a little bit lighter. It's kind of faded. But you can always toggle, right? You can bring it up anytime you want. Peter's back.
Yeah, Peter's back. I'm not so sure if I see it the same way, because the author map you can easily hide and bring back. I again, Peter.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a real bad hard crash. I had to do a full complete reboot, but I think I'm back again.
You're back, so that's good.
I hope it was a computer, not you.
Yes. So the thing is, the more I work with the vision, the more I find that it's really, really easy quickly to make the space cluttered. So I'm very concerned about anything that isn't useful to really hide it. And I think that if we try this interface that Andrew's working on, where you've hidden certain things, and all you literally have to do is look at your hand, and it'll show you how you can bring it back. Because, I guess, let's say you do this interface of, you look at your hand, one of the fingers is by category, you point to people, and people go away. Next time you look at your hand, that will look different. Maybe it'll have a slightly faded text. Maybe it'll even say show people rather than hide people. I think this is why it's so important that the gestures, once the basics of where you should look is learned, become very, very straightforward.
Well, out of interest, what do you mean by cluttered? I'm sorry, this sounds like it sounds like a silly question, but there is a thought in it, in a sense that is it sort of is it the aesthetic, is more the aesthetic, or is there some other functional aspect to it? I mean, so clutter describes an unsatisfactory state in a sense, or a not pretty presentation. But I'm just wondering really what the problem it's posed, the actual problem is posed to the user.
Well, I mean, our field of view, a workable field of view is roughly this, right? It is not that big. Our fovea view is, of course, tiny. So if we layer things, when I did the official NBA basketball site for China, one of the things we had was when you see a page with player names, you could point to any player name and a pop-up will come up with stats. There was a concern that this would be too heavy, so we played with transparency. But transparency quickly became clutter in the sense that it became harder to read the text that you had summoned. So that's why we made the stats things quite big and non-transparent, because you yourself had summoned them. To get rid of them, you just point away. So what I mean by clutter then, first of all, is if there is, like what Andrew has now, I completely agree with Dini. If you're looking at a rectangular document against the background, that's totally brilliant because the white background prevents visual clutter. But if we're moving small nodes of text, that's just a couple of words, and then you have some further back, I think that becomes visual noise quite quickly. And also, I really like the idea Dini has of standing in the space, spinning around and working all over the place. So yes, you should certainly be able to put things to the side, as in this is important, but not for now. And that is a very different act than this is something I don't want to see right now. I'm focusing on a different part of the problem.
I think we're going to want to talk to people who are disabled physically with no hand, because I think some folks might not want a prosthetic hand. They might see that as a incursion of their selves. When Richard and I were doing the ELMS 3.0 and talking to people and working with people who are disabled, who reviewed our work. And Frode, we invited you to review ELMS a long time ago, and you weren't able to do it. But we did have a group of people who were all disabled with different kinds of disabilities, from vision to just even exhaustion. And one thing we learned is that they didn't want to be abled necessarily. They didn't want to, blind people didn't necessarily want to see. People that couldn't hear didn't necessarily want to hearing aids. They wanted to sign. So I think before we start augmenting this for people, we should do some testing and give options. And that would be probably the best way to go.
Yeah, I think that is a very sound approach, obviously, because this is your experience and you know what you're talking about. I'm not sure, though, if we should design that into the project at this point. Because, okay, I mean, I guess we should have had this discussion earlier, and I didn't think of it till now. So that is not a complaint to anyone about what degree of abledness we expect a user to have for the first 2 years of this project.
Well, I think that's creating something that's completely open is not possible in 2 years. But one thing we can promise Sloan is that we have built in more obvious abilities, right? And it leaves open the possibility of writing another grant to address these things. So we don't have to solve these problems right now. Personally, I don't think we have to. But I think by articulating them, by showing that we're trying to acknowledge these and mitigate the ones that we can, that's all we need to do. So I think the conversation's healthy because we're getting it on record right now in our AI and recording.
Hi, Claude. Yeah, no, Dini, I very strongly agree with you. And this is basically what my new paper is about. And that's why maybe you and I can spend some more time just separate talking about it, because I really do think that, I'm sure Fabian would strongly agree, if everything is labeled well, i.e. metadata, then you should be able to have different ways to access it. We've been talking a lot about voice, and voice can be very good and very bad. So in a case of, if someone's literally missing one or two hands, in this context, fine, let the voice interface do more for them. If someone either has a speech impediment or cannot speak, fine, forget the voice and let the hands do it for them. This is really, really important. And I think that it's easy to look at someone who's literally missing a hand. It's harder to accept that all our hands behave differently. So that's what I think is so important. I consider impediments and special abilities to be a wide spectrum and try to augment all of us in different ways. That's why it's such a good case study of Klaus and Mark in the 1 and 2 columns. It is an actual important thing, I think. Yeah, Dini, and then Peter.
The philosophy behind our ELMS project is that at some point in our lives, we all become disabled, right? We may break a leg skiing. I mean, I was at DHSI. One of my close friends, Paige Morgan, broke her ankle in Ireland. And so she was trying to get around at DHSI, which is a lot of stairways and not much in the way of elevators, and a little scooter for her knee. I mean, I have to wear glasses now. I can't read without them. So we all fall into this at some point in our lives, no matter how old we are. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. And that's what we articulate to Sloan, is that we understand this and that we're trying to address it.
Yes.
Peter, I'm sorry.
Hang on, Peter. I'm going to have to add to what Dini said. There's two really important aspects of this, and they're a bit different. Dini, I think it was after you left on Monday, Brandel was saying how at Apple they do a lot of accessibility training, and it's based on we will all have to go through some of it at some point. But I think it is also really, really important that things that are not considered accessibility, just considered user preference, be elevated to the level of this. Because again, the example of Klaus and Mark is so clear. 1 or 2 columns. For most people, that's a laughable who cares. But for the two of them, and for me, it is really, really important because we literally have worse literacy in the other style of doing layout, or colors, or motions, etc. So just to broaden the spectrum.
I do want to mention at the university, we all have to go through training, everything from disability. I mean, I'm going through training this week. A lot of disability and sensory sensitivity falls under DEI. And so there's an incredible amount of DEI training, sexual harassment training. This is the kind of stuff I had to do even for this grant that you weren't able to join me in, unfortunately, because you weren't a university employee. But my list of training is probably as long as my whole body. And it's every year, retraining. So yeah, and it changes every year. So what was considered disabilities training 2 years ago is totally different today because we're becoming more aware and more, I think, kinder about it.
So Dini, just to really clarify on this very, very important point, because so strongly agree with everything you've said. The example of Klaus and Mark of 1 or 2 column text, where would you put that? Or how would you characterize that?
The screen readers can't read 2 columns.
No. I'm just talking about the preference of 2 people, not the technologies that can use it, because none of them are disabled in the traditional sense, right? But they have a very strong preference for it's much easier for them to read in this or that.
To be clear, I don't have I just don't see the point. It's not that I can't use 2 columns. I just genuinely don't see the point post-print of having it because it has so many disadvantages like the one Dini just mentioned. So I'm not sure I have a particular difference to Klaus. He just likes it. I think it doesn't have that point.
Okay, well, sorry then, Dini, just to make the case even clearer. For instance, in the color choices that I ask people to rate, somebody wants a slightly this and somebody wants a slightly that. These are real differences between people feel this is an eye strain or this is not. And it turns out that what lowers eye strain for some people is completely different from others. Neither one of them are disabled in any way. But those differences are, of course, really important to try to take into account. So I'm just wondering, with all your thinking and experience, where you think those kinds of differences fits.
So in our courses, we teach aesthetics, right? And we teach usability, right? And for me, they go hand in hand. And aesthetics and usability includes personal choices in some cases. I mean, it's personal when you can't see, but even if you're not sight impaired, it's easier for me to read white on black or black on white than it is white on yellow. So there's some real usability issues involved in this, even if we don't understand what usability is. And then there's aesthetic. I just don't like yellow. I just don't like to read yellow. It bothers me. Personal
Right.
choice. I don't like it. So, I mean, I think you're right. There are personal choices, but sometimes those personal choices dovetail into aesthetics and to usability. We
Oh, yeah.
cannot possibly account for everybody's personal needs, but we can do what Apple and other organizations have done is give some choices, but not in 2 years. We're not going to do customization in 2 years, but we can acknowledge that it's necessary. And my cat's biting me. Hang on. So, yeah.
Peter, you're being put on the longest hold in history. Okay, agree with everything, but I just saw this thing earlier on Interaction Design Foundation. It's all obvious stuff, but the way that I look at it, you can all see the screen, right?
Yeah.
So we have accessibility circle, usability circle. I think we should have a user preference circle, and it should almost be of equal value. That's kind of how I'm beginning to see it. That user preference is not a luxury. It's not a nice to have. I think as interfaces become more tied to our bodies and our brains and our eyes, we need a fuller spectrum. Just like we look at, it used to be that people had a brain condition or they didn't. Now we understand there are many conditions of how our brains are different, which is why we have neurodivergence and a whole wide spectrum. I think it's the similar thing. All right, that was a lot. Peter, thank you so much for your patience.
Okay, I wanted to thank Fabian for giving me the courage to try connecting this to the headset. It has a little wireless dongle. The dongle goes into USB to USB-C adapter. That plugs into the side of the headset, and it just pops up and operates as a mouse in the Quest 3, which is absolutely delightful. It gives a little oversized angle-shaped pointer that moves around on the screen, and you can change the relative size of the pointer so that it's less obnoxiously oversized, which is good. So that worked well. My next experiment will be to see if the dongle for the 3D Space Mouse will be able to work with the headset. So we'll see how that goes. I'll give it a try. General question in terms of deliverables to Sloan, are we looking at an app that can run entirely in the headset? Are we looking at headset plus a companion desktop app all under the user's control? Or are we looking at some federated system of multiple user-controlled apps that are able to talk to each other to exchange data? Or are we looking at a centralized server, either a centralized server that we fully control, in which case we could use cool things like WebSockets, or are we looking for something that will be deployable on a shared hosting platform, many of which filter out the ports that WebSockets needs, causing the sockets to only connect in one direction and be effectively useless?
No
Beanie,
apps.
this one's for you.
All open. No apps.
Yes, but also along that, if you want to make something completely and utterly proprietary and not give away anything, if it can somehow exchange information with our system, it can definitely be listed as an external system in support of what we're doing. Right, Beanie? Oh, that's a cool glass, by the way. It's up, yeah. Oh, I love
Wine
those.
glasses, weird wine glasses.
Yeah,
I don't use them for wine.
Yeah, because I killed a few days discovering all the ways that various WebSocket libraries will not work on my shared hosting platform. So that was an interesting exercise. I kind of wish that I'd looked at the Reddit post that said, hey, the probability of getting WebSockets to work on a shared hosting platform is exceedingly low unless you're able to go in and manually open ports and play with the low-level configuration files that the hosting providers are loath to give ordinary users access to for obvious, understandable reasons.
So, Peter, I have two pieces of work I would suggest you do. One is finish your paper for Human and submit it. And secondly, because it's coming up really soon, And secondly, can you write at least a paragraph on using the 3D mouse controller in XR? That would be a really good thing to have for our book, especially if you write it right away, where you're still having problems configuring it and setting it up. So we have one paragraph or so of your frustrations, and then we have another one of your experience down the line. That would be really great.
Okay, we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping it'll show up as a gamepad and hopefully expose all of the different dimensions that it's capable of providing. That would be really interesting for use with desktop VR, but I think I might be crashing again. Everybody's frozen. Were you able to just hear me now?
We can hear
Yeah.
you.
Okay. You're moving again.
Yeah.
All right. If I crash again, it'll be hopeless. I think I really need to replace this laptop. It keeps telling me that I'm out of system memory.
Oh, yeah. Hang on. I'm just going to give you all the link before I forget. And please click on that Twitter link. So this is Matt Neary. He is part of our community. He has been in here before. Fabian, I think you know him maybe. Anyway, I've asked if he can come.
I don't think so.
Okay. I've asked him if he can come here on Monday and show what weirdness is happening on that tweet. Because he's used some kind of encoding and AI and all kinds of stuff, and text changes color, and I wonder what it actually is. So it might be fun for us. Because Mondays now, I think we did well last Monday. There was no Sloan mentioned at all. Uh, just go-
Oh, in other news, I'm starting to go through the Exhibition and Experience Design Handbook, which is a text looking at exhibits and world's fairs, museums, trade shows, and the like. And it has a pointer to a much earlier 1938 work on exhibition design that's supposedly in a digital collection somewhere. I'm going to try to hunt that down. It had a very interesting graphic representing the way a standing visitor could be looking at different panels at different orientations in a three-dimensional space. So I thought, wow, that might be interesting to carry over into XR. So I'm going to try to get a copy of that graphic that I can show you guys.
Yeah, cool. That would be useful. Andrew, let's return to the gestures a little bit. So let me see if we're talking about the same thing. User looks at their non-main hand. Titles appear on fingers. Currently, what options do you have? Is it
I have just the labels of the fingers. Like I said, right now I'm trying to make a usability demo, not
that's
actual functions.
that's absolutely fine. Yeah, no, first of all, I really like your approach. But hi, Dini. We're back to talk a little bit about Andrew's specific hand right now. So yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. Also, I really like the fact that when you do this demo to us, as with everything, we archive it. It's an important component step. So it's perfect. Okay. So I'm looking at my non-main hand, and index finger has the word index finger on it. So if I want to select something that shoots out from my index finger, is it already visible, or do I have to do a touch to see those options?
So it starts by just showing the four base nodes, and there's a little like sort of glowing tip on the end of your other finger. As soon as you bring it close, you don't have to touch it. You just get close and it snaps to it. So it's really nice kind of just doing this and moving through the menus. I've been playing with it a little bit, but it doesn't look great, which is why I'm trying to do some more work. As soon as you point to that node, it then shows any subnodes that it connects to. And if you point to that node, it then shows any subnodes connected to that one. So this is how you would navigate down the sort of um, It almost will end up being like a fractal. But as you go down the different branches of the fractal, they reveal themselves.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. Okay, so then I have a couple of other questions. So we got the fingers covered, literally. Uh, does the palm of the hand have an action potential, so to speak?
Yeah, so the thumb and the palm have nothing right now, and I can easily connect things to it. But I didn't like when I was messing with it, I didn't like the idea that it was kind of behind the others. But we can absolutely put stuff there.
Could we, and I'm looking for arguments here in the best sense, could we maybe have the palm of the hand be a back button? So if you are looking at a document in a space, if you do that, it pushes it back. So that you always, because it's easy to get lost in cyberspace, right? And on the browser, we have a back button. Do we maybe want to have an analogy to that here?
I would say just a single back button doesn't make a lot of sense because we have forward and back. So might as well have like a navigation option where you can change the order of things. I think you would need at least two um, to move things back and forth. So you could have
So,
two buttons there, but that would start to get a little bit cluttered where you look at your hand and you just get overwhelmed.
Can you,
by back, were you implying more of an undo function in terms of go back?
I was implying not so much an undo, and I think that's a really important point, Mark. We should have some sort of an undo as well. I was thinking more, let's say we're in the library and then we've gone into proceedings and we want to go back to the library. So I do mean back to a level of hierarchy of storage. Can you sense a tap on the back of the hand that is away from the camera?
Uh, yeah, you could in theory. That's what the wrist currently does, which I
So,
think we're going to end up removing or changing that function because we don't need the prism menu anymore with this. Right now it's there for debug stuff, but I doubt it's going to stick around for too long.
so could we logically, I'm not saying we should do this, but uh, touch the back of the hand to go back, front of the hand to go forward, to, bring something forward as a focus button.
Yeah, yeah, in theory, absolutely. I feel like it's not very intuitive, but that's not really my place in this.
I'm giving you a backhanded compliment. The fact that we can experience, sorry, Frenchman, I saw your non-approval there. Okay, but it's fun. This is what I want us to think about offline, of course, as well. And of course, Andrew, you're doing a stellar job at doing so. Finding out where these things map onto our body is really, really nice. I mean, kind of a jokey way is to hit your head because that means head and then back. That's what we do in water skiing when we're in the water. No, we don't want to be in the water, head back, right? But that's kind of a joke. But if we can find things that more map onto forward and backwards, it might make a lot more sense.
Okay, I found the illustration. Let me see if I can bring it up close enough for you to see. There. Is that visible?
That's visible.
Okay, grab a screenshot of that, guys.
Okay.
Okay, so that was very intriguing. And that's from the Exhibition Experience Design Handbook by Timothy J. McNeil. And let me give you the ISBN. Okay, 978-1-5381-5798-5.
Yeah, that's cool. But let's spend some more time on the hands. We'll probably reconvene or leave early today, considering we have a little less to do, and that could mean Andrew can concentrate more without constant interruptions. But okay, let's also look at least for the sake of testing. Yes, Mark, please.
I'm just thinking. I suppose once again, I'm trying to generalize what's going on with this sort of forward and back thing. So this is not a sort of by way of a sort of negative reaction, but just thinking that, of course, going from say the library into a document in one of the things we have at the moment may not be the same transition. So the go back in this sense is actually a transition what I'm trying to work out is it a state transition? Is it a transition from one part of a visualization to another? Because clearly this is something we'll have to unpick, because go back is intuitive in the moment, but probably in all sorts of different visualizations will mean something really quite different. So that there's a subtlety that go back and undo sort of touch. And then where they normally depart is where going back involves doing 5 or 6 undos, in a sense. In other words, it's nesting several things. In your mind's eye where you want to get back to. You probably don't know how many things the environment, the app had to do for you to get from where you were to here. So there's an interesting subtlety of the signaling, which we'll have to think about at the environmental level in that.
Too bad we can't just snap our fingers.
Yes, or click your heels.
I mean, I think about all the. I mean, I'm not trying to be flippant, but I think about shows like Bewitched, in which there were physical movements that they would do to create magic, right? The nose twiggling, wiggling, and then snapping their fingers. This kind of stuff with I Dream of Jeannie. She'd shake her head.
Yeah.
These are all gestures that were used to evoke some magical event, right? And essentially that's what we're doing. We're evoking magical events in this space. And they're not always mapped onto normal, easy behaviors. This was not easy.
No, absolutely. And specifically, and what we have now, we have 2 spheres, right, Andrew? We're kind of in the library sphere, so to speak, and then in the more reading sphere. At least 2.
Yeah, it's not very clear now where the spheres overlap. From a user perspective, yes, there's 2. There's technically 3 because the map is its own as well, but the map is currently overlaid because we don't know where to put it.
Yeah.
I have isolated each sort of interaction into its own space, which we may want to change that, we may not, depends.
Yeah, no, exactly. But okay, so all right. But the thing about you've pointed at something, selected it, and now you want a further option. I do think that that is a second-hand thing. You've done this. And one thing that might be cool, imagine if it is actually a pop-up menu, but it doesn't pop down, it pops up. So you just take your second hand, you just do this, an upward swipe, and on the object, a menu then appears above it, as though you have done very much a I Dream of Jeannie magic lift, and it comes out of there. Let me just repeat that. I would confuse myself. Point, up comes a menu.
So I'm wondering why we need pop-up menus to show up when we interact with something. Why can't we? Because we currently have a selection box now, right? So we can select things. What if you just select what you want to interact with, and then the menu just hits those things?
When you started talking, it became obvious. Let's pretend you didn't say that. I'll pretend I said that. You're absolutely right. So what you're saying, just make sure I heard you right. Point at the thing, pinch, then you look at your other hand, and you got the options right there. But now the options are for that item rather than generic, right?
More or less, we already have like a selection box to draw around things, and it highlights the object when it's selected. So I was wondering, why don't we just have these menu items interact with the selected objects? Because that was my impression of what we were doing. If you want to like point and like sort of drag it on, that's maybe it might start to interact weird.
I think okay. So once you
We
have
could try it.
once you've selected more than one item, you can then do layout options. You can't do layout on one item. That doesn't make sense. But the
Well,
thing,
maybe because you might be able to do a layout on one object, right? Because the snapping would still work.
yeah, you're right. You could, yes, sure. But okay, fair enough. But here's the thing. If you have selected nothing and you now want to see all the humans or people or whatever, that's an example of non-selection, and you look at your hand to show and hide stuff, right?
Yeah, you can have the menu change if you'd like, or if we don't want to have things changing order, we could have some of the nodes sort of like grayed out if they're not applicable. So if you only have one thing selected, like okay, two of the nodes don't work, cool.
So basically, what we're talking about is the left hand becomes
You
context.
mean the non-dominant hand or the dominant hand? It's confusing if you're not right-handed.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant non-dominant. I'm going to have something. If anyone wants to talk, please go ahead. I can't see. I'm looking at something here.
Just one quick one, and a slight tangent, just for Andrew. Are the two or three spheres, are they structurally, are they sort of peers in the data structure of the environment? So I'm
Right.
thinking about in terms of when you move from one to another, are you moving from in a nested sense down as it were down a hierarchy, or are you moving between peers?
Yeah, so they would be peers in that sense. Essentially, they're just groups that I'm calling different environments because
Sure. I
that's how I organize
mean,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
there's a
the only reason
scene,
that, yep,
and
yeah.
inside the scene are the three spheres: workspace, library, and map.
Yeah, and
So they're all parallel.
I sort of said they can be co-visualized. I was just thinking if whether that helped us any in understanding what the sort of go back forward bit was.
Yeah, the whole reason why they're separated is because the save load system that I've created only looks for stuff inside the um, workspace. If we're going to start overlapping them, which we can totally do, I would probably rebuild the save space, the save mechanism to support all the other stuff. But that wouldn't be an issue. It would just be something we know I need to do.
Yeah, and another useful thing if it comes to that to record. I mean, because in a sense, what we're picking out are unintentional right or unintentional wrong steps in uninspected impediments from design.
So what I'm showing here, this is how I'm experimenting with map in author. If you select more than one node, the context menu is just select all in the same category. So that would be, in our world, it would be you point to one thing, you look at your other hand, let's call it the other hand, and all it has that's relevant to this is select all in same category, right? If you select only, sorry, that was if you select more than one. If you select only a single node, you get more options because then you can edit the node. You can edit the definition of the node, and you can still do select all in the same category, right? So that's what I mean, that the context menu for layouts, general, show, and hide, these are different from select one or more items, what the context menu should, because our other hand becomes a context menu, right?
Yeah, there's an interesting thing that sort of comes in here. And I was thinking again, I'm thinking of the sort of tutorial something I was doing the other day for somebody is that a lot of the descriptions here seem to fit very well to a developed knowledge space. In other words, this is a place where you've already decided what everything is. Because one of the things that's most interesting with the XR sphere is exploring things where you don't know what the shape of things is. And a reflection I would take from doing a fair amount of work in that sort of context is that selections become somewhat different because I mean, until you've actually labeled things, until you've actually put the labels on, they're only similar in here. Whereas if you show me your library where you've already labeled everything, it's actually comparatively trivial to say I want all the dogs and not the cats. But if you've just got a bunch of possibly animals, some of which are dog-like and some of which are cat-like, you want some subtly different selections. I'm sorry I can't put it more concretely than that, but it's just an observation thinking as we hear the space being discussed. Yes, Fred.
And that is exactly the reason we have decided that we're working on a set of proceedings papers. Because you are completely right. If we generalize, it can become very difficult if you're not working with a set of categorized or tagged data. Absolutely. Now, I do think that for our authoring year 2, we need to attack that head on. For now, it is someone's made an effort to label the bits. Here are the good ways to go through the bits. Does that make sense? And is there agreement on that? Sorry, Dini. Yeah.
One thing about year 2, not sure about year 2, but maybe that's the next grant work.
I was
We'll
just
see. We got a lot of writing. We
Mark.
got a lot of writing to do.
I was just telling Mark that's for later.
Yeah. Okay. We have that whole writing component yet.
Yeah, just a thought in terms of the current thing. Of course, my understanding, because if you're reading, the only time you really read proceedings soup to nuts is when it's new to you, because once you've read it, you've categorized it. So, in fact, when you're reading proceedings, actually isn't a space where you would have categorization available because you haven't yet decided what things are.
You will have categorization available from the editor.
Yes, yeah, you'll have some. Yeah, some, but yeah, a lot of it will be fluid still.
Yeah, but and here's a really, really important point. I think we have decided that it became clear that a part of writing that is important, that is also part of reading, is annotations. So even though we're not going to do annotations right now, we should probably design our gestures and environment with the ability, at least the potential, to assign annotations. So when you do the pointy stuff, if something is interesting or not, problematic, all of that, that should probably be able to go in there. So when you then go back out to your wider view, library or whatever we might call it, you will have access to all the papers that you found to be this, that, and the other. So that is another layer of commands we need, I think.
So what you're suggesting is we're going to have 2 sets of menus, one for reading and one for writing?
I'm not sure about that. I'm really excited, Andrew, to test. So if you have something before Wednesday and you want us to do it, to give you feedback before Wednesday, do not hesitate to keep it secret or private or anything like that. What I am suggesting is that within the gesture language that we're looking at, which is insanely exciting that this is real now, that we do consider the viewing, the interacting, the changing, all of this stuff. That's what I'm saying. It should probably be in the same, you look at your other hand, you know, once you've selected something, you have an option to lay out or annotate. This is very exciting. And then, of course, there's a question of how the annotation is stored and shared, etc.
Fabian, you're very quiet today.
I'm listening.
Well, Fabian, since Dani focused on you, the things that we're now talking about with the hand and Andrew's world. Sorry, that's rather maybe important. Just 1 second. I'll mute. Sorry, it wasn't important. He's trying to do a big thing in his life, so suddenly it's a bit funny now. Anyway, if this makes sense also in your environment, would you also be willing to, interested, and able to take Andrew's hand quite literally into your world so we can see if such an interaction can be used in 2 different spaces?
I am interested in trying for sure. I'm not sure it's easy to bring from one implementation to another. Yeah, because there are a lot of side effects and things that are. It's not that composable. Some things are, and this usually is a little bit tricky. And I don't think it's something usually that I want to say it's one of, for example, if you look at no-code environments, it's rare interactions or rarely things that non-developers do, like putting assets in place. Usually, non-developers can do some kind of scripting in the sense of like one action after the other, but interactions themselves so far, maybe it's an interesting thing we can try to step back and wonder why it hasn't been the case so far, because honestly, I don't know. I'm just stating how, as far as I can tell, like you don't have frameworks that translate one interaction to another. Like I don't think I've seen that. So that begs that question: why is it not the case? Is it just laziness? Is it because nobody bothered? Is it because, I mean, I actually remember, yeah, that was super abstract. I was at a workshop in Toulouse 5 years ago on geopose and how to position objects in space, but at any scale, basically anywhere on Earth or in front of me, etc. And there was somebody there for a hackathon, a researcher. I'm going to share his work, not right now because I'm going to need a bit of time to find it. But he was looking at how to abstract away interactions and how to basically build them kind of automatically. And to be honest, I think his work, even though good, was so abstract, like how to abstract interactions away, that I think it was so niche that I'm not sure most developers even understand the need for it and that's how it can be implemented. So that's kind of where I see some kind of gap and where maybe his work could help, but I'm not sure. I'm always happy to play with this kind of novel things. It's also why, because they are not so composable usually, why I have so many branches. So in my code repository is because that might break things. But its core, indeed, like how do we interact with information in XR is quite fundamental. But because it tends to break, if I do branches, it's like individual sandboxes, if you want to kind of bring a metaphor around this. And if I have independent sandboxes, that's also why sometimes you see completely different background, like going from a kind of purple cube or a forest or whatnot, is to try to, in my mind, isolate those sandboxes. So yeah, I'm happy to do another sandbox, basically another branch and the ability to try another kind of interactions. I'm happy also to step back thinking why are they not swappable, composable, etc. But yeah, it's deep seas. It's something a bit can be hairy and complex.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Poor Andrew is probably freaking out. So I have a question then to the two of you, Andrew and Fabian. Could we have something like a hand lab where there is a system, obviously accessible inside Andrew's build through some setting, where you have a graphic of a hand and you click on a finger and you have little pop-ups to decide what interacting with that thing does. And you mentioned no code being a bit of an issue, Fabian. So my question, first of all, then would be to Andrew. Let's say we build such a thing. How would you say that, okay, so index finger on a graph, so this should do, should it be literally paste in the code? Should it be some reference to the API? Should it be a pop-up? Just to make the user be able to change what finger does what, Andrew. How much you want to do that and how much you want Fabian to use the same thing in his environment to assign actions to those effects, if it can even be done.
So just to clarify, are you saying you want the user to be able to remap the whole menu? I've never heard of that before. I know like button remapping is a thing.
I'm saying
But like are you letting them shuffle kind of like what's in what menu?
potentially. This is
Okay.
nothing I'm saying we should do. I'm not saying we should build it, but as a theoretical construct, at least for what, let's say we're doing something commercially and you have to deliver something to Fabian so he can have the same mapping in his world. To have the interface feel the same, but of course a few different commands because it is a different environment. How much you present it to him if you forget about the end user.
I mean, in theory, I can have mine remappable. Sending that to Fabian would just be the same as with the library stuff. Like I could technically make a JSON export, but that's kind of useless because none of my functions would do anything in Fabian's, and none of his would do anything in mine. Our environments are very different. The interactions are totally different. So there's essentially no overlap for a menu like that, except for maybe visual. Um, but yeah, like theoretically that could be passed off. I don't think I'm understanding what it would
There's
be useful for.
yeah, a couple of things and how it might be useful is that, for instance, we've decided that the pointing gesture, you've done amazing code for that now. That may be something someone like Fabian would want to use, because then the user from our environment would have the same, hopefully, kind of pointing feel, because they will all be tweaked in different environments, right? And furthermore, we have the difference between selecting one node, many nodes, or no nodes, what comes up here. So if all you give the other environment, like Fabian's, is the knowledge that if you select one node, the hand should show X amount of things. And Fabian would be the one to decide what they are, but it would look the same design style, because one of the things we're missing, of course, is consistency between environments. Even if the commands are different, it's just going to open a window.
Can you just have a crosswalk? I mean, couldn't he just crosswalk it into his own system? Just, you know what I'm talking about? Just, you've got Andrew's code, you know what your code's going to do, just crosswalk it that way?
I the way I'm seeing it, Fabian and I are kind of researching in totally different directions. They're like associated with one another, but we're both doing very different things. I'm not sure why we have to push so heavily to have um like I don't even have it working yet in mind. This is still a test, and we're already trying to like push it
Oh, no,
into
no, no, no,
another
no.
system. It's
This is entirely theoretical, right? In the same way that we talked earlier about further accessibility down the line. This is not to change anything you're doing now. I am just wondering about, but I'm beginning to feel more and more about the importance of personalized environments. So that's why if you have certain things set up somewhere, like we talked about a magic glove a while ago, this would kind of be like the glove. It's an interaction mechanism. It's like a virtual version of Peter's 3D mouse. So it'll do different things in different environments, but
So
you get used to it.
yeah, honestly, my initial reaction was also like, no, basically, good idea and it makes sense, but give up, it's too complicated. And I gave some references to the work I mentioned before about OpenUIX, and honestly, it's super abstract, but it's very interesting, and I think it's a powerful mental model, but I really don't think too many people can hold it in their head, and it's just easier basically to hire a guy or hire anybody to re-implement it, to just be a little bit vulgar. That being said, I do think it's interesting. It just is hard. One though parallel with the last discussion we had. So I'll just briefly. It's back about the gamepad. So this and and other gamepads. So like this one, which is a gamepad with its entire console inside it. So I gave references also last time. But what's interesting with this one, so the Steam Deck, so it's a Linux system. It's the console with a gamepad in it. And what's interesting is there is a whole community behind it because it's not PlayStation, it's not whatever. But it's so flexible because it's just a Linux system with a computer in it that you can run pretty much whatever you want. So retro games like Super NES and whatnot. But it means the Super NES, the controllers, they don't look like that at all. They don't look like that at all. So you need to find a way to make it work, which is the community-based mapping that I shared, I think on Monday, I guess. So what I'm trying to say is maybe we could do this. Maybe we can have a community-based mapping where you have a binding between a function, let's say add cube or open document and whatnot, and a gesture, which is like touch hands, touch back of the hand, whatever. And if it's implemented, great, it works. If it's not, and it can be just based on a convention, like the name of the function is that, and the name of the gesture is that. And if it's not supported, nothing happens. If it's supported, great. Maybe if it's not supported, there is a kind of fallback, like the user needs to have a keyboard and type in the console instead. Honestly, it's very hairy and complex. I'm not sure how tractable that is, but I do think it's interesting and important, and pretty sure it's undone except the work cited below. I'm also happy to invite Michael to discuss about his work. It's a long time ago, and he's very obsessed, I want to say, by it. But if you believe it's interesting and it would fit here, happy to invite him to unfold a bit more on this.
Yes, that would be very interesting on a Monday. Peter, 1 minute. On this topic, Fabian, using the hardware analogy was really, really useful. Thank you. Here's the thing. The operating systems are putting all kinds of gestures in, and it's the wild, wild west with what different apps are doing. In the early days of the Macintosh, they had evangelists, of course, Guy Kawasaki and so on, who went around to developers and said, you must do Command S is save and all of that stuff, which was great for that gray beige little box. But now we need to go further, but we also need consistency. So if later on, when this hand works, Andrew, as you want it to, if you could figure out a way that is easy for you, Andrew, to open it up so that Fabian can steal it, because it makes a lot of sense, then if I steal it, I'm saying that as in, implementing it without having to deal with us. So it's a fun way of saying that. Of course, it's not the best language. These types of experiences, if they are open, different developers can start using it. And the fact that we are mapping onto fingers in a way that the end user possibly, if someone else does it, can specify is quite powerful potentially, rather than having to do this or that or whatever. So I think this could be a really good contribution from our project.
Yeah, very briefly, because I did some explorations a bit on that topic a few months ago, and I made an issue on my repository called Gesture Manager. And basically here, the idea would be that the Gesture Manager, which has binding functions between gestures, like we make it a JSON, and then again, we send it to another, whatever can interpret it. So instead of being a file format describing, a file describing content, here the file is describing binding between function and gestures, and whatever the other software can do, it will do. It's not something I would expose typically, but here, if it can be interoperability, not on content, but on way to access it, I think it would make sense. So yeah, maybe the issue there could be some kind of starting point.
The link you just gave, Andrew, I'm sure you've clicked through on it as well. That's basically what I'm saying, but just in a much more intelligent way. So that's really, I found a emoji, which is a heart on fire, combining both. So there you go. That's how I feel about that. Peter.
Yeah, I think what we want is to have a loose coupling between the gestures, the trigger actions, and the underlying actions and operations that are being supported. Also, I think we need to look at formal languages and what we can do with parser libraries that are available to us. I sort of look at it as receiving a temporal stream of events, and we want to be matching against that stream of events to be able to define gestures. So sort of like at a very, very low level, I could have, maybe finger numbers, joint numbers on the fingers, and angles representing the degree to which each one of those joints is flexed. And maybe 3D coordinates as to where they are in a space relative to some center point on the user. Then you'd have a whole stream of events sampled at some frequency that you'd be looking at as your data stream. Then you could run a parser against that stream to describe higher level gestures. So if you had, finger one straight followed by curled all the way in within a temporal span of 5 seconds, that would trigger an action. So you want to be able to define. So we need sort of like a language to define gestures based upon low-level temporal stream of events that are things that are sensible across the board with most of the devices that we're working with, and go in that direction. Somewhere I have a book that was talking about languages for user interfaces. Let me just pop over to the library for a minute, and I'll see if I can pull it off the shelf. I shall return.
That
Yeah,
makes me wonder, how does XR, I apologize, how do the current environments parse this? Because presumably they're doing that because they're doing hand tracking, so they know where it is. So how in the environments that sort of Fabian and Andrew are using, how does the as it were your code interrogate the hand? How's the binding done there?
So you have different levels. You can have like a low level where you have a skeleton with different points, and then it's up to you to interpret it. Or you can have, let's say, on A frame, you can have a higher level function or an event, which is like, oh, pinch happen, and from that event you have a position in space, which is like 0, 1, 2, or whatever. And that's it. So it depends a little bit where usually the strategy is you don't go down the stack at a low level if you don't need to. So if you just need a pinch and your high level library use it, you use this. If you need something like it's not pinch, but it's like pinch between thumb and the pinky, for example, then you're going to have to do it yourself and either see how it's done or re-implement it from scratch. But yeah, here in WebXR, I'll put a link in the chat basically on how gestures are interpreted, how you basically get the skeleton when you need to learn a little bit your physiology and what's available, like corporal and all. So I'll put that in the chat.
Thanks. Because I was just trying to draw the cross link to what Peter was just describing, because I'm sort of assuming in a way some of that's already there by the sounds of it.
Well, so it's there,
I
but
just
it
want to show
depends
his
on the
flying
controller.
fishes.
Hello. So here in the chat, hi Edgar. Yeah, I put the one related to hand tracking, but it's only one kind of input, and I mentioned this just because that's the one we had in mind until now. But it can be also those controllers, can be the gamepad, can be. So yeah, again, because it's hairy, it can be a keyboard, like just a keyboard, for example.
What was he chewing?
It was a lot of flying fish, like Japanese colored tube fish. So they're like flags, kind of, or something. And for some reason, had a massive bunch of them. I don't know. What was all the say hi? What was all the flags? The fish?
Oh, they're windsocks for Children's Day.
Oh,
Hi.
that's what it is.
Hello.
Sorry, stress about Edgar. We're going to a Korean restaurant with a Korean family. We just entered Edgar's school and we're introducing them to the best Korean restaurant in the neighborhood. So when you guys come over, we will take you there too. It's awesome. Feel jealous, get on a plane. That's the plan. Well, I know we're not finished, but I just have to say and recap, this was a really good call looking at the spectrum of human variation is important. Looking at finding a steering piloting mechanism. I love to, of course, refer to Doug, and somebody reviewed Doug's demo in 68 as saying he was dealing lightning with both hands. And I think it's very evocative, that notion of sitting there doing things. And we're building that now. This is not bad at all. This is powerful. And then to be able to not build as a CD-ROM anymore, but to build in a way that others can use it as a dream if and when that happens. Yeah, it's very exciting. Very, very exciting.
I can briefly also I can try to share my screen because I did a demo earlier today, bringing voice like last time, but also adding a little bit of hype, admit, so LLM. And I mention it because I do admit that, again, last time when I say things and I can move them around, so combining the two affordances, felt surprisingly good. And I'm wondering if keeping on building on this, it feels an interesting path, let's say. So I'll briefly try. Let me know, please, if you can see my screen. So I can't see you. Huh?
We can see you.
So I'm speaking basically in the headset, which is a bit silly because you can't hear it. And what I say, it becomes a post-it note. And then when I use this function, it's going to use the content of the post-it note, like something like Hi to the Penguin, to start a short story, like super short, like 10 words, because it's just the example. So here I said vocally the gentle penguin, and right away as unpinched, because it takes like half a second, let's say a second, it starts to begin the story. So I keep it short because we don't really care what the story is. And why I shared it is because unlike, and I'll put the link in the chat, unlike until recently, this was done pretty much only by using a server, being OpenAI or whatever, which in terms of privacy and understandability was a problem for me. But here it's done on the device. So it means speech recognition is done on the Quest 3 and the LLM, so what generates the text, like the short story, is done on the device itself. So nothing leaks out. And I think in terms of having something both exciting, interesting, etc., but without costing privacy, it's an important constraint. So yeah, and I put all the code and all the clarification there in the link to reply right away, Peter. The library I'm using for speech recognition is called Vosk Browser. It's using WebAssembly to do recognition. What's powerful and better than the Vision Pro is that in the Vision Pro it's English only, whereas here in Vosk you can pick the model and then you can use it in French, in the Spanish, whatever you want.
Can you type in what that word is so I can see the spelling in the Zoom chat?
Yes,
When you
but
say
we-
Bosk, I'm
yes.
trying to see it in my head, but I don't know how it's being spelled.
Vosk, and here
Okay,
it's
I would
for
never
Vosk.
have guessed that. Thank you. I was
And
thinking SQE.
yes, I don't even remember when I searched it. I think I found it 2 years ago or more. And the idea is like, well, web speech is nice, but so far the support from browser vendors like Chrome and Safari and all that is it's a mess. And basically doing a polyfill where you take some of the load from the browser and you do it however you can. It's a bit annoying, but that's a good way to be inclusive. Otherwise, the demo only works on the Vision Pro. Cool, but should it? And here, polyfilling a bit means using Vosk browser and WebAssembly. You can do the recognition on the device, and I think even the Quest 1 is probably powerful enough to have the same kind of capability. So it means a lot more people can play with it in different languages. So yeah. I think all the links to be theoretically on the Twitter also. All the code, everything is there.
By the way, as a relevant bit, Edgar, show what you found. We got this from our auntie in Japan just now. Can you tell what it is?
It's a samurai helmet.
Yeah, it's a samurai helmet.
It's delicate.
Yeah, it's really delicate glass. I think it's relevant to what we're talking about because we talked a lot about hands, but we haven't talked much about HUD, and I know that HUD isn't necessarily good in XR, but we shouldn't forget the head. So I thought that was nice that he came in with that just then.
And I have to run away, so sorry everyone. But
Wait, before you go, this is what I've been faffing about in the background. So this is the Interaction Design Foundation. Very obvious. Accessibility and usability overlap is what we call UX, obviously. So I'm just playing with the idea of adding another circle of individual preference and seeing how we can do. So Dini, if you have time to talk to me separately about this at some point, that could be fun. Maybe this is an entirely wrong model. I don't know. But yeah, anyway, just wanted Fabian to have seen that. Bye, Fabian. Thank you.
Hi. It's interesting when you talk to people in usability, they don't want to talk aesthetics. When you talk to aesthetics people, they don't want to talk usability. And what we try really hard to in the program, I think Andrew would probably shake his head yes or no and agree with me, is that we try to talk about both simultaneously because they go hand in hand. So Holly in the lab, my senior designer, best designer I've ever worked with in my life, better than any artist I hired when I had my company, the best UX UI designer ever. And she can code front end. So I mean, she's got the whole spectrum of abilities, and the vision she's got for making things work is beyond belief. I mean, there's not one thing she has designed that's not incredible. And every time she makes something, I think, oh, that's the best thing she's ever done. It's like it just keeps getting better.
That's perfect.
But I mean, I think what we're talking about is the way in which these things fit together. And user preference is connected to both.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, like I guess all of you, most of my younger life, I felt a bit lonely. And then I meet you guys, and it's, you're all differently in the brain. And the amazing thing, I think, all of us is we're very different in how we are different in the brain. And that's become a more understood thing. We talk about spectrums. And I think we really need to extend that into a lot of other things. That's all I'm saying. There seemed to be a threshold, certain point, you are so different that you consider different. Within that, who cares? It's just choice.
I think what's gotten us there personally, I mean, now I'm taking this off topic, but I think the whole notion of DEI, identity. And so identity has been broadened, the scope of it over the last several years. So it involves not just race and gender and sexual preference, but even just personal choices, religious beliefs. Are you a moderate Catholic? Are you a, Orthodox Catholic? I mean, just the whole spectrum of it. And so now we're talking in terms of continuums. So now gender is a continuum as opposed to, boy girl. So yeah, I think the whole DEI thing is, as much as people have screamed about it in different sectors of our country, it's done a lot to help us open our eyes and be more, I think, some of us to be more kind.
Yeah, where that works.
Not all, but some.
Yeah,
Some
no,
people.
no, exactly. And then, of course, we get to the point where it's called woke and we have to start the whole thing all over again. But yes, absolutely. These are very important issues, and I think we all share the importance of that.
When somebody calls me that, I tell them I'm alive. Yep, I'm alive.
To
I'm
have
not
that as
sleeping.
an insult is just so weird, isn't
I'm
it?
totally alive. I believe in freedom. Today is Juneteenth in America, so it's an important day for us, celebrating the ending of slavery, potentially. The last slavery in America is in prisons.
No
So
comment.
no comment.
Have you seen the article in The Economist on this today?
No, I haven't. I just finished The Guardian this morning.
It's kind of a highlight on the complexity of these issues. Turns out that 30% of slave owners in the South were women. And initially,
Right.
people wrote in history like, oh, they weren't aware of this and stuff. But then it turned out because it was still the way that when you got married, all your property was signed over to your husband. So the only thing you can own were movable things in the house plus slaves. So it became fathers who wanted to take care of their daughters would buy them slaves on birthdays and stuff. So the way these structures can provide absolutely horrific outcomes are ridiculous. And it took apparently decades after emancipation for these women in the South to be able to have other types of ownership. So there are stories of former slaves having to share basic food with their former slave owners because they had absolutely no way of getting money.
Mhm.
What? So we got to be careful about the scaffolding. Oh, Fabian's gone. But yeah, cultural, social, legal scaffolding is important. And I think that is essentially what we've been talking about all day. And also we need scaffolding in different areas. So it's good. Right. Andrew and Dini, oh no, you're not going to campus today. You have a holiday, right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a holiday today.
I'm so glad you're celebrating with us. At least I appreciate it greatly.
I have a doctor's appointment today too, damn it.
Well, I do have a confession to make. I want to thank Frode for dragging me kicking and screaming into a headset.
Yeah, Peter, Thank you. But talk to us a little bit about how it feels, what you've done, experiences you've had, what's different, blah, 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 blah. I will mute.
Okay, I had my first hyper reality experience. I was in the headset, I had a fan blowing, and in the environment, there was a wind coming from the same location in my room as the fan was from. And that suddenly just made it feel 1,000 times more real. Just having the air matched up with the tree movement and the clouds blowing in the same direction as the airflow. That was really surprising. You're muted, Frode.
I've had that experience, but with heat in the library in the winter. It was like, why is it hot over there? Oh, there's a thing that in the environment was supposed to be hot. It's like, why is, oh yeah, I'm sitting next to a fire for crying out loud. Yeah. And also, of course, have you had it with sounds, where certain sounds in the real room is interfering with your VR experiences in ways that are not clear? It's fun, right?
I really haven't had any issue with sound, but I keep it quiet when I have the headset on.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Right. As we wrap up, Andrew, I'm available 24 hours a day for questions or testing, obviously. I think it is near absurdly exciting the stage we're at. I'm glad that I'm doing parallel work with the map in Author because to an extent it's the same, but then they diverge in spectacular fashions. So it's really, really fascinating to see the huge differences. And I do think we definitely agree on trying to use the entire space. And the kind of gesture systems we're looking at now will hopefully allow us to do that. And also, this may help Apple sell a hell of a lot more headsets. Of course, Quest 2, but Apple has paused the Vision Pro 2 development. They're now only looking at a cheaper one. Hey, let's make the most incredible work environment in the world and spark the revolution. It's amazing.
Well, they could probably make it cheaper by losing the outward-facing display. I really don't see any point in people seeing simulated eyes on me. It could just as easily be a couple lights.
I think in my use cases, it's very often useful because I sit at the Groucho Club quite often with it. And when someone walks past, for them to see that I'm kind of glancing up at them is very different than seeing a blank face.
Peter, just to let you know, women have been tested with headsets. And one thing that we have said in general is that we don't like being blinded and not seeing who's around us. We don't know who's coming near us. And there's been, reports of, kind of people working in groups with headsets and playing in VR and women getting, goosed and stuff like that. If we see what's going on, it's a little safer for us.
Well, no, I'm talking about the outward-facing display so that someone else in the room can see the simulation of your face. I absolutely love the pass-through. I'm so glad that I went with the color pass-through of the Quest 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, but there are two things because one thing that I think is wrong with the Vision Pro right now is if I take a picture using the Vision, there is just a little bit of a white thing. It isn't clear. I had a friend the other day ask me about this in a place I should not be recording, again, club. And then I just to test it with her, she was standing there and I filmed her. She couldn't see. There was no red thing or anything. So more should be projected rather than less. If you're being filmed by a headset, come on, Apple. That's not brilliant that's covert. So like it can be used in different ways. And also I could imagine that at a certain point, these will be acting as QR codes, like how Apple does it with the Apple Watch and the phone. So that if you have more than one Apple Vision Pro in the same physical environment, they can be aware of each other in a way that the user is happy with rather than all kinds of electronic data. So yeah, no, they can save money on that, but it's also an intriguing aspect. Now, if you don't mind, guys, please go to the YouTube link. It's less than a minute. And please either email me, text me, Slack me, or write in the comment which colors you prefer. That would be really, really greatly appreciated because I'm just trying to build this point for the paper, doing a test of, I think I have 24 people. If I have 30 people, should be enough saying, look, people want different. Dini, you've just gotten over a terrible unwellness. When you have time to to talk about the issues around this with a view to maybe co-authoring the paper, which I would really like it if you don't mind doing. I would love that.
Yeah, so folks, I just had was it day before yesterday? Yeah. I got home from the event, felt great.
This is a real B&H birthday story. We've been known for our customer service since 1973.
Judging by the face, I think that was
Bye,
on Peter's
everybody.
machine.
Thank
No,
you.
no, don't go. That was a big mistake. Please continue.
What was that?
Oh, it was Peter's machine acting up.
A tab just suddenly opened up and started playing a commercial. I'm so sorry about that.
It's funny.
I was on Frode's video, and when Frode's video ended, it jumped into the commercial for the B&H.
Sorry about that.
When John,
and response on the colors, I'm ambivalent. I think on different days and in different moods, I'd want completely different colors for it.
Please
There
write
is no one color that would be preferred.
Please write that in the comments. That's similar to what Mark said, and that's very important. But Dini, what
yeah, just I'm feeling better. I had a sinus infection that's still lingering, but I'm okay.
Oh, sinus, that's very unpleasant.
You know, it's funny, I never get dizzy. I don't get headaches, but for some reason I got a sinus infection in my ears. And I was walking like a fish with no tail. So I did not play Beat Saber. Andrew, I would have fallen over, I think.
Huh.
I'm dying to get back in the headset. I thought, no, I probably better not right now. So
that makes sense.
Well, I still haven't had anything that gave me sim sickness, so that's a good sign.
Yeah, I don't get sick often. I mean, I've never taken a sick day my entire life from work. So I don't know. It was just really weird. I just tired. It's a big project we did, Andrew and I, last week.
Yeah, it was. And you take these things seriously. So there's a huge amount of mental energy that goes into it. You know, you don't just show up and say, huh. So yeah, it has a cost.
Yeah, and it's the last one. This event's been there 24 years. I started participating every year since 2011, and now it's moving to Montreal. So there's a lot of bittersweetness, you know, a lot of goodbyes, you know. And I was recounting to Andrew and the rest of the folks that I've been on that ferry 54 times. I don't know when I'll be on that ferry again, but it's such a beautiful city and such a lovely bunch of people, lovely bunch of people.
Does that ferry go from Vancouver, Washington directly?
No, you have to drive up to Port Angeles, and then you take the ferry over to Victoria, right into the harbor. It's a beautiful ride in. And then there's also a ferry from Seattle that it's a clipper that goes across. And then there's one in Anacortes that if you ever come up this way, I recommend you go through the San Juan Islands because it goes through all these gorgeous islands. And you can get off the ferry, eat dinner, spend the night, get on the next ferry, go to the next, you can island hop all through the San Juans. And there's, I mean, yesterday, coming back, I saw an orca, which is really cool.
Wow.
So the other thing that's fun to do is to take they have little seaplanes that go from Victoria to Vancouver. And it goes right over the water, like pontoon boats, like pontoon planes. And you can see orcas in the ocean. It's just the most incredible thing. And I've done that several times. So
if we stay long enough, guys, we need to do a road trip and a boat trip and a plane trip.
You keep going to Silicon Valley, you're not going to get up to Victoria. If you go up to Seattle, that's when you do it, right? You go to Seattle, do the stuff up there, and then take the ferry over and see Canada.
Yeah, I mean, after working with you, I haven't been to Silicon Valley except for coming up to see you, obviously. But depending on what our plans will be, it would be nice to spend a few extra days in Vancouver and you know, as a team, go different places and talk a lot, basically.
Well, it's a beautiful, British Columbia is incredible.
Yeah.
Very different from Montreal. It's incredible in a different way. But anyway, so it's a bittersweet event, and I was glad to have Andrew and James with me and John. So I was, you know, we had a good time. Stayed in, and Andrew cooked for us in the mornings. He made breakfast.
Oh, I didn't know that was one of his skills.
He has many skills.
Now I know.
All right, folks, thank you so much. I'll see you later.
Sorry, I'm just going to catch Rob's comment here. Rob, if you look at that video, can you please tell me on the different slides, they have a little number on the left, which one you like, because then I can tabulate you properly.
I'm pretty sure it was the first one.
First one. Okay. Well, that's great. That's
It was interesting.
Right, it was the second one.
hang on. The first one was white.
Second one then.
So you want the one that's slightly yellow, right?
Slightly yellow. Yeah.
Slightly yellow. I'll call that WL1. Okay, that's great. Dini, will you also do me the honor?
I will when I get off this. I've got to get a bunch of phone calls in. By the way, I had the top of my car fixed.
Oh,
Now I'm getting the upholstery fixed. So I'm trying to get things done this summer. So
That's
I've got to
great.
make some phone calls about my car, but I'll let you know today.
Yeah, very good. WL1. Just
By any
noting.
chance, just curiosity, did you run these through the Adobe color contrast for disabilities, all these colors?
No, no, I didn't, because this is serving a different function. The surprise was quite simply somebody who wanted white on black, but they wanted a different black, and that's when
Yeah.
it was really weird. It's like, to me, it's like, this is intrusive and noisy, and she was like, no, this is what rests my eyes. And it's like, okay, gotta look into this. So it's not trying to be
Yes,
usability, it's
sure
just to
is.
show humans are weird.
As I
I usually
noted
like
to
a little blue
Fred,
mixed in with my blacks. Sorry, I usually like a little blue mixed in with my blacks.
Okay, that's a reasonable thing.
In
as-
in usability testing, you never use a true black and a true white. You use a charcoal black and an off-white.
Yes, but this young student insisted on black. She said it
Okay,
was
I'm
much
just saying
easier.
though, I mean, if we're looking at long term, you don't want to, it's not done. It's just not considered good design.
Yeah,
what I found interesting, so actually, I'm working on doing some proofing on Fred's thesis. So I was a long time in author was. I actually found that proofing, I wanted more contrast. Writing, I wanted less. So for writing, I'm quite happy. I quite like the yellowish background. It's actually more restful. But when I'm proofing, I think my post-hoc analysis is when you're actually proofreading, you're actually looking at the shape of the letters. You're looking at the style. You're looking at the layout. You're not actually really reading the words so much as looking at the print. And there, the extra contrast helps. Because I found when I got massive eye strain trying to do it with a yellow background. When I switched to a whitish one, it was far less. And in response to Rob's thing, I learned today that MS Word has a background color control. It's completely useless because it uses the standard color palette. And who wants a bright primary color? So I suspect a lot of people would look at that and say, well, there are no good colors there. I won't use it. Whereas actually, the interesting thing that I do take away from author, for instance, is how easy it is to toggle that background color. And now I've realized that actually there's possibly a use in having different color choice for different tasks.
I think that is really important.
I'm intrigued by the proofing versus writing, because I'm proofing the final manuscript of a book, and it just occurred to me that maybe if I put on the in Pages, I think I can change the background to a soft yellowish or tannish color. I'm going to see if that helps bring out the text in a different way. That's a very interesting idea.
Yeah,
Thanks.
hang on, just really quickly, Dini. The fact that in usability testing you don't do that means that is exactly why we need to do it here. Because that person had a strong preference, and that is a valid preference. The fact that there is a rule that it shouldn't be done is part of our discussion. Anyway, lots to talk about. Wonderful to see you guys today. Peter.
One last thing.
Yeah, Peter, you go ahead.
Okay, this might be really crazy and off the wall, but I've always had a preference for text with a slight dropped shadow hanging off of it. And I wonder, is that something that we could have as an available option when we're having our color selections? And has anybody else noticed that, or am I just being wildly neurodivergent in finding that more restful on the eyes than just flat text on flat color?
I don't know, and I don't care, because you're right. If that's what you need, that's the whole point. So
yeah, we haven't had it up till now because it's not been something offered. So of course it's difficult to know why it's not there because, well, the design gods have not yet said it's a good thing, but and plus the fact that when we offer these things in general tools, most of us go bonkers and put them on way too, we put too much on and then turn it straight off. And
I like it subtle. Yeah. Not really insanely dramatic, but just very subtle and just seems to help tremendously.
I gotta go. Love you all. Thank you for today. This was very productive. And see you Monday. Unless there's anything else, obviously just get in touch anytime. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.